him at all. And just to maybe share with you a little bit more of the difficult times in which he lived, and I wasn't able really to read all that I wanted to from the Tacitus book. But he knew he was in trouble even with his own people for what he was doing. Many of them wouldn't understand. In fact, Winston Churchill, when confronted with the idea of the conspiracy to kill Hitler, and that went on for a while, went on for years, he offered it no support whatsoever. And Metaxas gives his opinion that the reason why Churchill would not support Bonhoeffer and Admiral Canaris and General Beck in the conspiracy was because Churchill had made a deal with Stalin and didn't want to offend him. Not really sure about all that, but we do know that Churchill never gave the conspiracy any kind of credit. In fact, when it finally failed with Valkyrie, with von Stauffenberg, when it finally failed, when they almost killed Hitler, there were 3 organs of information that Metaxas mentions, all of which condemned the attempt. Let's see now, one at a time. The first one would be the only Christian newspaper still in circulation at the time, condemned the attempt. That would be the first one. The second one I forget right now, because I don't have my notes. And the third one was Churchill himself. Churchill condemned the attempt as misguided and foolish. Well, does Bonhoeffer have anything to teach us? Or is he just another picture on the wall, a quotable guy, some guy to, wasn't he really something? While we today refuse to speak to the evils that he not only spoke out against, he did far more than speak, that we know. He acted. What do we learn? A true pastor is a true statesman. If your pastor can't explain the times, who can? Who are you going to look to? CBS Evening News? If your pastor can't do it, who can? A true pastor is a true statesman. It is the job of the ecclesiastical authorities to speak to the civil authorities. I ask again, and I've had these discussions with pastors. It's not our job. It's not our job. Okay. Then whose is it? Take the pastors off the table. They're not supposed to say anything. Now who? It's your backup plan. We, the people, need some leadership here, and we need some courage. And that's exactly what we don't have. Speaking truth to the civil magistrate is no distraction. Rather, it is often the mission. Let me ask you a question. Prophets throughout the scriptures, who did they spend most of their time speaking to? Civil authorities. Thank you, Pastor. That's exactly right. See, we've got it exactly wrong. Today we say the civil authorities are the one group of people that the ministers are not supposed to speak to. And sure enough, we read the Bible, that's the one they spoke to the most. How do we get here? But we are here. Those who speak the truth are often the ones who pay the ultimate price. As John would tell us, as Dr. Bonhoeffer would tell us as well. Backing up to his early life as we wrap up our presentation tonight, Metaxas goes into his early life. When he came to America to study, came to America to learn theology, guess where he winds up? Union Theological Seminary. Across the street from the, I forget the name of the church, passed by
St. John the Divine.
St. John the Divine.
Built by John D. Rockefeller.
Yes, it was Rockefeller's money, as Metaxas points out here. And Harry Emerson Fosdick was the pastor, and he made a career out of denying the authority of the scriptures. That nonsense floated into its way into as Metaxas points out, into Union Theological Seminary. And Bonhoeffer spent a year there and said, you know what, these people don't have anything to say. All they do is they sit around and attack the fundamentalists. They've got nothing to say. This is useless. And he got out of Dodge. Stop the grave robbery. Questions? Who will be the first?
I have a question about the IRS scandal right now, and I think that involving the Christianity and ministers, is it true that you think that our modern day Black Robe Regiment is speaking up more, that possibly may have led to this problem with the IRS not giving 501(c) status or whatever to a lot of places? And if that's the case, if there's a connection that can be made there, what can we do as Christians to kind of expose this more to people?
Okay, good question. Phyllis, right?
Yeah.
Two things. I'm disturbed at this IRS scandal for perhaps the wrong reason. Where are the churches?
Right.
In other words, if you're going to line up the enemies of the state, then come on, can we talk? That's what's going on here, right? You line up your enemies and attack them with taxes. If a man is known by the company he keeps, he's also known by the enemies that he makes. And I'd be feeling a lot better about this IRS scandal if the churches were being aimed at. And they're not.
But they are being. They are being.
Well,
Can I speak to that?
yes, Pastor John.
These 501(c)(3) nonprofit corporations, which call themselves churches, beg the permission of the government to form their body.
You got it.
The First Amendment was written, the first provision of the First Amendment was written not to protect the state from the church. It was to protect the church from the state. These 501(c)(3) pastors and churches, if you read that section of the code, it says specifically that the pastor may not speak from the pulpit on any issue of public controversy.
Yes.
They are scared to death to speak the truth, as Dietrich Bonhoeffer did.
Rated attack.
Yeah, I believe that was written by Johnson. That particular line. Any subject of public controversy. But I'm saying, yeah, there are churches that are lined up. They definitely are. But not enough for me. Not nearly enough. Yes, George.
I do want to weigh on that. That's exactly what I was going to say to him. Why are churches falling under the 501(c)(3) when they should just say, okay, I'm not going to pay the tax. I mean, I'm going to pay the tax. I'm going to get out from under the government, and I'm going to preach what I want to hear.
You can't open a bank account without that provision.
But if you would get the
can't
whole
take
body
tithes.
of the people and say, we have had enough of you, and then you could do it.
It's all about the
Patrick
money.
Henry was the very first one to really talk about how can you legally tax a church, okay?
It's the difference between tax immunity versus tax
Well,
tax
see,
exemption.
think of, when you're getting permission for
That's
a
a difference.
501(c)(3), you're going to your government, which is made up of people who worship at the altar of Baal, and you're saying, I want permission to have my church and have a pulpit. So I'm going to the devil himself to ask him if it's okay if I can preach the word of God in my church. And that's what you're really doing. You're actually going right to the government, which is now the most high. And not really. God is the most high.
And that's again the difference between tax exemption and tax immunity, because tax exemption is permission, whereas tax immunity is a declaration.
Well, just pay
You
your
don't have-
tax.
you don't
Just
have
go
any
out
right.
and pay
Yeah.
your tax.
Yeah,
And say what you
there
want.
are churches out there who I don't know how they've done it, but they've gotten past the 501(c)(3) thing, and they still don't pay taxes. I think their days are numbered in this
They would
country.
be, yeah.
Quite frankly, I truly think they are.
Well, I can tell you how we do it. I have two house churches. And if we have a need in the body or in the community, we collect money in cash and we fulfill that need. We don't report anything to anybody, and it's none of their business.
Which is true. Which is true. It's definitely not their business at all.
And I do not take a salary. I have never taken a salary. I will not merchandise the gospel.
Amen to that.
Wow.
Amen to that.
Praise the Lord.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow.
Our brother here makes the argument for cloning.
That's awesome.
Okay, someone else. Yes, Dave.
So you just, what I heard there was you have no problem with someone like Dietrich Bonhoeffer trying to assassinate a public figure.
Yeah, let me address
Can
that.
you elaborate?
Yeah, I'll be glad to elaborate on that. I certainly don't want to say that I know exactly where that line is. What I want to communicate, though, is that there is a line. And that's where I believe I argue with an awful lot of my Christian friends, and many of them pastors. I'll give you a quick example. A pastor friend of mine had just written Metaxas' book, and he wanted to tell me about it. And so I said, great, sounds good. So I said, well, what do you think the lessons are? And boy, I hardly got that question out of my mouth before he said, well, we don't have anything like that going on today. I said, okay, I didn't say we did. I'm just trying to figure out what the lesson is. And I asked him, I said, at what point will we be at the point that Bonhoeffer was? And that's the lesson. At that point, I kid you not, he was backing up from me physically. He's like, I don't know. I don't know when that is. I don't know. I mean, he was like literally running away from me. The problem there is, as I see it, starts out with the idea that we don't even have a line. We never do what he does, and that's why we need to stop the grave robbery. Now, if you want to talk about dead people, we're way behind the 8 ball on this. Hitler with his 8 or 10 million or whatever they were, I don't know what the real numbers are. Exactly, no one does. Our number's a lot higher than that here. And I think of, anybody here ever hear of Telemachus? Telemachus. Don't ever forget Telemachus. He was a Roman citizen. He was a nobody, and he opposed the games, the gladiator games. And he wasn't the only one. There was a discussion about how wicked they were, because the gladiator games were really kind of like ritualized murder for entertainment. It's pretty much what they were. They dragged them in. They had to kill each other. They were getting killed whether they killed each other or not. It was murder for entertainment is what the gladiator games really and truly were. Telemachus, we don't know much about him. One day he'd had enough, and he ran out into the ring, screamed for it to stop, and began to try to stop it himself. Once one guy against a bunch of gladiators. They turned on him and they killed him, as did the crowd. Get that guy out of here. But guess what happened? The game stopped because of the courage of that man. Now, I don't think the game stopped unless there's a discussion, unless there's people standing up already. Did you see what I'm saying? We're not all Telemachus. But we need to speak up, because in speaking up, every chance we get, we make the Telemachus, we make the Dietrich Bonhoeffers possible.
Yeah, but then what do you do? Someone's liable to hear your speech and be like, oh, okay, let's go start shooting people. And that could be very unscriptural also.
Yeah.
Common
Because-
sense has to come in.
Well, I understand that, but
Bonhoeffer addressed that. Someone that he knew was very close to Hitler, asked him directly. He said, the young guy, he said, I can do it. He said, I'm close enough to Hitler, I can kill him. Should I? And that's on the spot, right? I can do it. Should I? And Bonhoeffer's answer was, and I think his answer was judicious. The answer he gave certainly was because he was scared, but he said, look, he said, there's a lot of things we don't know here. This is why I think it's such a difficult thing. We don't know if what's going to happen later is going to be worse than what we have now. Who knows who's going to jump into the vacuum? And Bonhoeffer's answer is basically in Metaxas' book, it's basically an answer of just war theory. Before you do an act like that, you have to have a reasonable expectation that what's going to replace it is going to be better. I think of Mugabe in Zimbabwe. Anybody familiar with that guy?
Yeah.
A vile man. You know, you know, he might not be that easy, hard to kill. But in Zimbabwe, who knows what you're going to get? You might get a young guy. Mugabe's old. He's in his late 70s. You might get a young guy who's just as bad as 40 more years ago, it says. So these are difficult questions. It's one of the reasons why the German conspiracy went on for as long as it did, because they had put together an elaborate plan in place. Once Hitler was gone, they had it all figured out. They weren't just going out there half-cocked, let's kill the guy and then see what happens. There was a lot to consider. That young man, by the way, never did do that, what he said he was going to do. He did something else. There were 3 plots to kill Hitler. One of them had to do with an attempt by the same young man that Bonhoeffer knew, with a bomb that he was wearing himself. He was taking Hitler on a tour. He was wearing it himself. It had a crude mechanism. Everything was supposed to work. Hitler decided to leave halfway through. The poor guy had to run to the restroom, deactivate the bomb, which he did. But I mean, that young man that did not ultimately pull the trigger, obviously still had tremendous courage. But you gotta know, you gotta have at least a good idea that what's going to replace it is going to be better than what we have now. Okay, so let's say, this is a question that's way too easy, but I'll ask it anyway. Easiest question of the night. Obama decides he's had enough, and he resigns because the IRS scandal in Benghazi. How many, honestly, in this room can say that you would have a lot of confidence that whatever replaced him would be any better?
Joe Biden, right?
Yes.
What?
It'll-
And
it would be
he's the same thing as he is.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So there's an awful lot that goes into a discussion like this.
Yeah. They elect like kind.
Sure. Now, I will not say, as some will say, that it's never right to kill, yes, kill, a head of state. I believe Bonhoeffer did the right thing. I believe General Beck was doing the right thing. I believe Canaris was doing the right thing. And all the rest of them, as well as, Ravenel wasn't involved in the conspiracy as close. There is a time to do this. The fact that I can't say exactly when it is does not negate the fact that the line exists. And you know, I had one person say to me, a pastor actually said this to me one time, I said, well, you really believe abortion's murder? Of course it is. Well, you should be out there stopping people then. He might be right. But the fact that I'm not out there getting arrested doesn't change the fact that it's murder. It just might mean that I'm just too big of a wimp myself. Right? How many people stood by when the Jewish people were getting killed? Well, not just Jewish, but Slavs, Gypsies, and so forth were getting killed in Germany. No one's going to say that since the people didn't get out there and try to stop them, that it wasn't murder. And so I will not stand here and say that it's always wrong to do what Bonhoeffer did. Otherwise, I have to say what he did was wrong. And I'm not willing to do it.
I got one more question.
Yeah,
Go on to that. So you said it's not always wrong to kill a head of state. What would you say about David and Saul?
Different
Come back
animal.
on that.
Saul was anointed by Samuel,
Okay.
direct from God.
Okay.
I can't say the same thing about Athaliah, for example, who was killed by that priest, Jehoiada. Not the same thing.
And Eglon.
Yeah, Eglon's another one. Eglon with the Eglon of the left-handed dagger, and Ehud of the shall we say Weight Watchers poster child.
Reverse Eglon.
Was it Eglon? Ehud? Yeah, Ehud. You're right. Ehud was the left-handed. Yeah. Yes.
You had Saul and the Amalekites, and he didn't kill the head of state, so Samuel did.
Had to take care of it for him.
He acted did that.
Did indeed.
We had Elijah and the Baal worshippers.
Yeah, so Elijah certainly took care of business. And by the way, next, I'm thinking about this, Toby. If it's all right with you other Mars guards, I want to announce the next topic after interposition next week or next month. And by the way, this topic was about interposition. It truly was. The generals that tried to stop, they were lower magistrates, if you will, that tried to stop a real bad guy at the top. This whole topic we talked about is about interposition. After that, I'd like to talk about Elijah versus Ahab. 2 months. I'd like to lay that one out. Ahab, you may recall, was actually a pretty good king. He expanded Israel's borders. He won a lot of battles. He was our idea of a good guy for a wicked man. I want to talk about Ahab. Ahab and Elijah have a lot of lessons for us. Yes, Margaret.
Did Cromwell have to put Charles to death?
Oh, there you go. That's a good example. Oliver Cromwell and Charles I. Yeah. Yeah, at the Parliament, Cromwell was obviously at that time a member of Parliament. Yes, the Parliament did. Absolutely did. A trial and an execution. Yes, John.
For a recent example, not calling people out on the carpet, you got Ben Carson and Cal Thomas. Ben Carson called the president to task on completely justifiable grounds.
Yes.
And Cal Thomas says, "Oh, you shouldn't have said that."
Yeah.
What did Cal Thomas say?
Cal Thomas said Ben Carson owed the president an apology.
That was like 2 days later.
Yeah.
I remember seeing that, John, and I thought Cal Thomas was being facetious.
Yeah.
But he was very serious. He owes him an apology.
It's
This is
the same thing we're talking about here.
no doubt.
We had some reading material on that too for the new folks. I don't know if it's here, or if we have any copies of it.
One more question. Did we convince you that we must stop the grave robbery? We got to go one way or the other with this man. Thank you. Then that's what our purpose was tonight. Thank you for your kind attention.